Hey everybody, I'm Lisa Campion and this is the Miracle of Healing. You know, these days there's so much in the headlines that are really disturbing about violence against women. We're talking about Sean Diddy Combs and all that's going on, all that's happened with the Me Too movement. And these stories really beg the question, like, what can we do about it? Can men be reformed and changed? And what role can men play in making the world safe for women? And I'm so pleased to bring you this super special guest today, Michael Swerdloff, he's an amazing guy. He's also a friend of mine. So this is kind of a more personal conversation than maybe you get on my podcast. Michael's received training from the Dalai Lama with many other incredible spiritual teachers, and he really gives an honest account of his journey of discovering honest masculinity from the inside out in his new book, Raised by Wolves, Possibly Monsters, From Mobster to Reiki Master. So, wow, this is such an important conversation, Michael. So thank you so much for writing your book and for being here today.
Thank you. It's good to be here. And I haven't seen you since dinner last night, so it's fun to be on the screen with you. And thank you
Yeah.
for letting me participate in your show.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. And I think your message is super important and really, really, really unusual. And it, just took a lot of courage to write this book. So, I know you as an incredible Reiki master, healer, therapist, DJ, the ecstatic dances, and yet your life wasn't always like that, right?
No, it was not. You know, I came from a really chaotic, sometimes violent home. And what I learned from that was that people can love me, people can love you, and still treat you really poorly. And that you have to learn to fend on your own, which I wish I didn't have to learn that lesson. I wish nobody had to learn the lesson from childhood that we have to scrape and claw by ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, and the kind of violence that you have in your home, many people have to deal with that, but yours was a real particular type that not everybody's exposed to. So you can tell us a little bit about and it's in the title of your book. But talk a little bit about the origins of your story here.
Sure. So, um, my father was a real life narcissist. And as you know, because of what you do, Lisa, the social term narcissism and actual narcissists have very little to do with each other. When most people talk about narcissism, they're talking about people who are self-centered and self-absorbed, who show expressions of narcissism but aren't actual narcissists. My dad was a narcissist and he lied, cheated to everybody in his life, but especially my mom. The whole 27 years they were married before they got divorced, he had dozens of girlfriends. And he actually wasn't the worst influence on me. It was my older brother. And David was a real life sociopath who grew up to be a strong arm in the mob. And if you can imagine what it would be like to be who somebody practiced and learned how to be a strong arm with, it was me. I was that person. And I was thinking about this earlier today that I had this unique thing of when I was like in middle school. I could walk around and say and do anything I wanted in the town we lived in because everybody was petrified of David. And there was this power that came with everybody scared of him, teachers, police officers, security guards. Everybody was afraid of David, football players, wrestlers. Everywhere we went, people got nervous when he walked in the room. And it didn't occur to me till decades later that I was scared all the time because I knew what he could do. For most people, they were threatened by his reputation. It was a real life thing for me.
Right. Yeah, and it really shaped it, everything about you, Michael, right? How you dealt with power, how you handled, yourself in the world, and especially your relationship with women, which is a lot about what your book is about.
It is. It's the theme of the memoir is my relationships, if you will, with feminine, with girls and women. And for me, I was, when you talk about how culturally men are taught to be violent and aggressive and to hurt women by all these messages, I was literally sat down at dinner time and told how to do this. Literally, I was taught how to manipulate, exploit, and scare women into doing what I wanted from them. And of course, then it wasn't women, it was girls. And deep inside of me, I knew it was wrong. I just wasn't strong enough to override what they were telling me and the fear of, well, what if I'm wrong and I go through my whole life and I never get a girlfriend, I never have a wife because they're saying this is how you do it. So they won, and I'm not a victim of it. They won. I knew what I was doing when I was making bad choices. I knew when I was touching girls' bodies in ways they didn't want, when they didn't want me touching their bodies at all. I understood what I was doing. And I know it's not talked about a lot, but I felt the power of it. I felt the power of knowing she was scared and there's nothing she could do right now. I felt power in that and I was scared of that. And of course, felt incredible shame afterwards. And this isn't something that boys and men talk about when they hurt women is the shame that we have and what we have to go through to numb out that shame, whether it be more violence, whether it be drugs and alcohol, whether it be porn, whatever the thing is, we have to do something to not feel the shame. So there's some degree of the choices I made determined who was going to be in my life because only certain people are around drug dealers, criminals, and violence. So you kind of, the rest of the girls all knew to run for cover. The ones who didn't, because of whatever they were going through and their traumas and whatever their experiences were in life, they paid a consequence for being my friend. And then it got worse. And then it got worse. And then I remember this. I was somewhere in my 20s, and I remember hurting a really good friend of mine. I'm trying to fall asleep at night, and I remember having this feeling, I've now become them. I'm now my father. I'm now my brother. I'm now my uncle. I'm one of them. I always had this safe distance that they were like this. They were awful. I was just bad. And I remember it. Like I can literally remember everything I was looking at in my room at the time. I've become one of them.
Was that the turning point for you, Michael? Where things turned around?
I so want to say yes to that. I really do, Lisa. I want to say that's what happened. And I want to say when all the awful things I did to myself and the people around me and the drugs and the crime and the alcohol and going days and weeks without sleeping between all the cocaine that was in my body and the fear and the shame and the hate. I want to say that's what happened, but it isn't. It got worse by me doing better. I got a job and I was earning good money and I was getting respect. And there was some degree of separation to all of that life. And then the con job that I was doing on me, the hustle I was doing on me, it ran its course. And I just couldn't be me any longer. And I was 29 and it was September 11th, 1989. So a different September 11th. So September 11th means two really big dates in my life. And that's when I got clean and sober. And my journey was not pretty. My life got worse in early recovery, but I knew something was going to change. I knew either I was going to get worse and die or I was going to get better, but I knew my life wasn't going to stay. So it started with me with getting clean and sober.
And that did that clean and sober journey begin sort of your spiritual awakening? Like what happened? I'm sure it was a rocky change. Um,
Yeah, like for me, I'm one of the few people that ended up in a mental hospital slash rehab after I got sober. Um, I was put in a mental hospital for homicidal and suicidal ideation. I was going to kill my girlfriend and myself. And I didn't say anything to her. She just got it. And she ran for safety. And I ended up the next day in a mental hospital. And when I got out of the mental hospital, what I came out with, and it sounds funny saying this, but it was real, is the only thing I knew was I'm going to do everything in my life to make sure I'm never in a mental hospital again. That's what I got out. It wasn't the treatment. Well, I also got my future therapist. So that was the other thing that came out of it. But, I was about a year and a half in recovery and splat in the middle of AA, going to a million meetings and doing all of the things. And they talked about meditation, they talked about spiritual awakening. And I was so desperate, Lisa. It was so clear to me that going to meetings wasn't going to actually make me better. Not meaning that AA didn't work, meaning it wasn't just not going to be enough for me to ever get sane, for me to ever feel safe, and for me to feel like other people are going to be safe around me. So I really took to meditation. And unlike today, in 1990, I had to travel to another state to find a book on meditation. You just think about how weird that is 35 years later. And I found a book on meditation and I read it and I did what they said. And I had no idea if what I was doing was anything like what they were talking about in the book. But I knew that was my answer. I just knew it. I knew meditation. I knew being away from the world, that stopping, that breathing, connecting to what my definition was of God at that point in my life. I knew that was the thing. So that's where it started for me.
mm. How did this shifting happen? I mean, it's a lot to sift through, all the things that you've been through and untangling all the beliefs that got downloaded into you by growing up in such a violent, part of society and such a violent family. It must have been like layers and layers of stuff you had to dig out from under.
It was. And my therapist, Lorraine Hollier, my God, I think back and because as you know, I've been a counselor and social worker for a really long time. And I think back and I just have this thought in my head. I can't imagine what it was like for her to be in a room with me, knowing that at any minute she's unsafe. And she worked so hard with me. And so the untangling came from a combination of going to meetings and being in recovery, working with sponsors, doing the steps, having friends, having women in recovery give me a lot of flack about who I was and how I was treating them and everybody else. There was my therapy with Lorraine, and then there was sitting on the floor of my bedroom in silence. And some combination of the three things began to shift.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, Michael, because I know you as a person who is like one of the safest men for women to be around. That is like sort of the meaning and purpose of your life, around this issue of consent and helping men really understand what it takes to hold safe space for women and to help women really understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that, because many of us don't. So you know what do you want to say to the men that may be listening? And I mean, it's such a powerful conversation that I don't think it gets talked about a lot. Somehow we sort of gloss over the nitty gritty details of that you bring out. You really put it under the microscope to look at it. But what would you say to men who are hearing this, or who feel like they're part of the conversation?
Two things. One is if you feel like you're too close to the line of breaking consent or what's acceptable behavior, or maybe this will get me in trouble, or maybe she'll hate me, or maybe she'll tell all her friends I'm a jerk. If you feel you're getting near that line, you're too close to it. You know, like it's kind of like when you were a kid and the first time you saw a good fire and you wanted to stick your finger in it. And there was one time you stuck your finger a little too far into it where it got burned on some level. And then moving forward, you said, okay, I'm not doing that again. To me, it's the same thing. If you're questioning, am I getting too close to the line in my behaviors? Like, am I touching somebody or getting somebody drunk or getting somebody high, and I'm not sure if what I'm doing is legal or okay? If you're worried about it, don't do it. Do something different. You know, if you think you're becoming the guy that the girls and women in your life are afraid of, do something different about it. Which brings me to the second thing is we can change. It's really just that simple. It's not as simple as I'm going to decide on Saturday, October 5th to change. And by like October 10th, I'm going to change. It doesn't work that way. I know the new age pop psychology gurus like to sell it that way because it makes them get a lot more clients, but it doesn't happen that way. It's a process and it takes incredible courage and strength and stamina, because that's the thing people don't talk about with change is it takes stamina, a lot of stamina, and it takes a lot of humility. But the steps are there. And I don't mean steps as in 12 steps, but the steps are there. It's starting with, do I want to be different? Then it goes to, what do I need to do to be different? It's going to be different for all of us, man. It's not the same. The journey I had to go through to become the safe, theoretically safe guy that I am today, that you know, and lots of us know, it didn't happen quickly. And for most people, it doesn't take decades. I started at a really far end on the spectrum of wanting to change, not just in terms of violence and the way I treat girls and women, just everything. I was really on the far end of the extreme. Most people aren't there. Most men, you're not there. And I know that. But it's not going to happen quick. And don't promise the people in your life that because you're now going to therapy once a week or joining a men's group once a week, in 3 months from now, I'm going to be a better guy. Don't make those promises because then they're just going to get more hurt. They're going to have less trust in you because now they're watching you do something about it and it's still not any better for them. So stamina. If you think of it as I've never walked a mile in my life and I'm going to train for a marathon, that's the model to use.
Right. Marathon, not a sprint. And
Yeah.
I think it's, just so sort of hard to think about changing society because we look at how embedded, misogyny and domestic violence and violence against women is so embedded in our culture and across the world. It seems when I think about it like almost impossible to make that shift happen. What do you think about that? Do we just have to do it on an individual person by person basis, or is there something we can do sort of in the broader scheme to create a shift?
Can I add one thing to the list that you made that is rarely part of the conversation? Is people don't talk about how violent men are to men.
Yeah.
When you look at bar fights, it's men against men. When you're out in a parking lot, it's men against men. When it's a war, it's primarily men against men. Whether we're talking about the prime ministers, the presidents, it's men against men. And because it's so embedded in our thing, for us men, we don't talk about it a lot, but anytime we feel threatened, we think the answer is to get bigger and bolder and louder. And if that doesn't work, find a way to intimidate somebody. So to me, it's not just what we're doing with everybody else, it's what we do with each other.
Mm.
But answering your question, yeah, sure. It starts with person to person. It starts with it starts with me. I'm a guy. It starts with me. It starts with me showing up safe to the people in my life, regardless of their gender, regardless of whether they're good human beings or not, regardless of whether I even like them. Like I don't have to, it doesn't have to be just my good friends and my clients and women I have intimate relationships with. It's everybody. It's the cashier at the grocery store. It's everybody. Start with being kind and gentle and respectful. I know it's really hip to say these days you can't love anybody till you love yourself, but how the heck if you've never experienced love in your life, how would you know what loving yourself is? But part of this is if we can't love ourselves, at least treat ourselves with respect and kindness because that's what we want other people to do with us, and that's what we want to do with other people. And it is my experience that the percentage of boys and men that deep inside of them don't have a core of kindness and warmth and safety is really small. I think most men and boys, this is our core. And we don't know what to do with that when we're scared or threatened or intimidated or feel like failure. My gosh, so many men feel like they're going to fail at everything. So they get bigger, whether it be physically or otherwise. So it starts with me, how I treat me. It starts with the people that are in my life all the time, whether it be my coworkers, my neighbors, sports coaches, piano coaches, everybody, my friends, my family. It starts small, and that's where it should start.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is pay really close attention as a guy, how the other men in your life are talking about and treating women. And that's where the courage really comes up. It's not a big leap for me to treat you well, Lisa. It's a really big leap if I'm at a gas station and there's a bunch of guys all hanging around talking about a woman or women in a certain way, and I don't know them, to walk over them and say, cut the blank, just cut it right now. That takes so much more courage.
Yeah, man, I feel that. I really feel that. And I want to honor you for your courage, Michael, for the courage you have of having this conversation, of writing the book that you did, of which is painfully honest about your, experience and your past. And I think it's conversations and the courage that you have, conversations like this that sort of help in shifting you know, the broader topic, opening up the topic for conversation. So just hats off to you for your courage.
Thank you. And again, it goes back to the stamina. Is I understood when I was starting to change my perception of myself as a man and my masculinity and my perception of girls and women and how they deserve to be treated regardless of whether I like them or not. When that started to change, it became really clear to me this is about so much bigger than me and the women in my life. It's so much bigger than this. And I mean, I've had the opportunity because of the things that I happen to do well. I've had the opportunity to impact a lot of people.
Hmm.
And I'm just getting started. And I understood in writing this book and then publishing it that it's going to stir a pot in a way that I'm potentially not ready for. And you know that because we've had conversations around this.
Yeah.
And it's a little different than when you're around four of your friends and one of them's kind of being a jerk. It's not a big leap to say, hey, stop being a jerk. That's not such a big leap to me today. It's a different leap to know that I'm going to be judged now, both by men and women, for much different reasons of people who read the book.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an interesting, challenging book to read. So I have to read a few pages and put it down and like go outside and walk around and, like feel myself a little bit and like, walk the dog and then come back and, read a little more of it. And I know you considered putting a disclaimer in the beginning about like take care of yourself when you read this book. And I kind of want to second that for people who do read it. And I do recommend that everyone does because it's powerful, fascinating, raw, inspiring, horrifying, all of it, touching. Like it's an incredibly important conversation, like I said. So my thing is, take care of yourself, and I've been having to do that, and I still can't wait to get back to it because it's fascinating.
Thanks. And I mean, all of those things you said are true. And it reminds me, Lisa, of just how the seeds of male violence have affected all of us, including the violent men.
Yeah.
Because I have no doubt in my mind that if some really violent men read this, they're going to be really pissed off at me. Like, I understand that women are going to be triggered by reading about what it's like to be in the man's mind and body while he's doing awful things, and that's going to be valuable. But it's going to also remind them of the experiences they've had when they've been on the other end of it. I understand that.
Yeah.
But I think for men who are violent, this is even going to be more challenging in a much different way. Because I'm not some big guy full of muscles that's like, hey, and us guys got to be better about this. We got to take care of the women in our life because we're protectors. That's not where I'm going. I'm going with we have to protect them by being better people, not bigger and stronger. We don't protect women by going to the rifle range, the gym, or an MMA course. We protect women by being safe people to be around.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And I want to talk too about sort of the other side of the fence. Um, what's the message for women in this book? And your message is a sort of an expert on consent. What's the story there for women?
Um, when I think about women reading it, besides getting the experience of a man who's taken some responsibility and accountability for who he's been and what he's done, which I think has value all by itself, I think it's valuable for women to hear what it's like to be a man in that moment, what it felt like to be him. Because all we know is he did something really bad here. That's all we know. And we have all kind of judgments on whether he should be in jail and mental hospital, what we should do with him, but we don't know about him. To me, the other piece that's so valuable is that men can change. And if he's somebody important in your life, don't expect it to happen quick.
Mm-hmm.
That men can change, but if you've been married to somebody or partnered with somebody for 3 years or 10 years, and you're constantly under the threat or the reality of violence, and he gets treatment, don't expect the changes to happen quick. Like, unfortunately, it may take him 5 years before he's really safe for women to be with him. So men can change, and it doesn't always happen quickly, meaning you can't depend on him going to therapy, and therefore by Christmas we're going to be able to go home to my family, and I'm going to feel safe with all of my teenage nieces there. No, you're probably not. And I know that's sad, and I know it's depressing. And the thing is, men can change. Anybody can change, not just men. We can change, but it doesn't happen quickly.
Yeah, it's I think that's an important sort of putting things into kind of like out of the movie, romantic comedy, or like the movie, like out of the realm of fantasy and into the realm of reality. And so many ways your book does that. And I want to talk, Michael, about how people can get your book. I also just want to give you a chance to mention that you you have the proceeds of the book, or some of the proceeds for the book, going to Rain in the Good Man Project. Is that right? Where it is?
Yes. So Rain is, they do all kinds of great stuff around women's safety, and they have the hotline and all of the things and great resources. So I wanted to make sure some of the proceeds get into something that supports women, and some of the proceeds to go to something that supports men. The Good Men Project, they are awesome. Um, so yes, some of the proceeds, it's not going to be a lot. I'm not rich. I don't expect to be rich, but it seemed important to me to that be part of the process. And a dear friend of mine actually came up with the suggestion a few months back. She was giving me some flack. It's like, you're sort of making money off of women's pain. No, I'm not going to make money off of women's pain. And I, but I hear you, you know, and I respected her perspective. So yes, so the book is actually being released on October 15th. You can currently get it on pre-order in lots of places like Amazon and pretty much any online bookseller. It's on pre-order now, and it's in paperback, hardcover, and in ebook format. Um, and yeah, I'm excited. I'm terrified, because as much as this is something I really believe in, but again, it's going to be out in the world that I've done a lot of awful things. And um, but more than anything, I'm excited. I'm very hopeful that people are going to get the opportunity to get this book in their hands or in their ears or somewhere, and um, there's an opportunity here. Just there's an opportunity here. I don't want to project what the opportunity is or say anything grandiose. Just there's an opportunity here for all of us.
Right.
And it feels like this.
Conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I know you're available for book signings, for other podcasts, for speaking to groups of people about this topic. And my hope for you, Michael, is that this book really kind of goes viral and offers another layer of healing around this, such as painful topic for men and women, this painful reality for men and women. And that I think my feeling is it's going to go that way. But I know you're available. If people wanted to contact you to get you for a speaking gig, or a workshop or something like that, how would they contact you?
really the best way is to go to my website, michaelswerdloff.com. That's really the best way, is to go to my website. Yeah, and it'll give you clicks to be able to purchase the book. It'll give you how you can get in touch with me about doing some public work and anything else. And, I'm aware that people are going to write me and ask questions, like they're going to send me 3-paragraph emails saying, I have this going on in my life and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, I'm here for that. I'm okay. So yeah, that's the best way to find me. But like I said, you can find the book currently on all of the online booksellers.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for being here for this conversation and for writing the book and just for being yourself in the world. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, Lisa. And I appreciate it's really fun that my first round of this, because I got several of them scheduled. My first round of it is with one of my dear friends. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks all of you for tuning in. Stay tuned for the next conversation we're going to be bringing you here at the Miracle of Healing.